What's up?
Renowned for being considered one of the world's best horror and cult film magazines, the terrifyingly terrific magazine, Fangoria, is an admirable aspect of the horror community. The internationally distributed American magazine isn't entirely niche, but certainly something that isn't mainstream at the same time. Ultimately, it's a somewhat hidden staple of the horror lover community that interestingly doesn't only have to appeal to those lovely fans of horror, such as those who enjoy cinema in general, or simply those who adore sociological elements of media. But regardless, no matter the potential of who Fangoria can appeal, what the magazine assumingly hopes to achieve is to give faithful and shockingly scary content for everything horror as a whole. Now, how does it achieve this, you may be wondering to yourself? Well, I absolutely can't wait to tell all of you. Now, I want to begin with the significance of Fangoria overall, and simply how it achieved becoming somewhat of a savior to fans of the horror community. An outlet for everyone who spent their fine days beforehand trying to keep up with horror films as much as they could. Based in Atlanta, Georgia, and knowingly edited by Phil Nobel Jr., Fangoria was first founded by Norman Jacobs and Carrie O'Quinn. Initially, Fangoria didn't do too well in sales as people didn't see value in a horror-centric magazine at the time. However, it was when an illustrated article on Tom Savini's makeup effects on the 1978 film
Dawn of the Dead.
Meet me on the roof at 9 o'clock. Getting out.
I don't believe
We're
it.
gonna
What?
get out in the chopper. We've got to survive.
that the magazine would gain interest through a notable impression of readers wanting to see more lavish and outright gory images of monster and carnage. Because of this, Fangoria would begin focusing on this element of interest. Thus, this would be the catalyst to a continuously long run of an iconic and fantastic horror genre outlet.
The bait that brought it out of its lair. See underwater thrills never photographed before.
Before Fangoria's initial publication in 1979, there were no other ways for fans in the horror community to indulge themselves in one of their most beloved genres to enjoy. Sure, they likely had small groups of friends and friends of a friend to get out how they felt about horror movies together. But it wasn't until the first publication release of Fangoria that others could fully come together to fully engross themselves in the world of horror as much as they could have before.
Sounded like a wild animal.
Might be some beast the gypsies left behind.
Rather fortunately, when Fangoria first hit those newsstand shelves, those individuals finally now had an outlet that they ever so lovingly desired, whether or not they realized that they needed it based on the previously mentioned initial sales of the magazine. 4 decades of Fangoria has brought a multitude of horror and cult content to fans alike, along with bringing up social commentary within horror content itself as well. However, let's dive more into that in the next section.
How bad can it be?
So look, I go do my research. Apparently, a whole bunch of brothers been missing in this suburb.
More specifically, Fangoria revolves around creating content that centers itself on contemporary horror. It originally had started as a fantasy magazine, but after figuring out that horror had suited them more, the horror content had begun rolling in, and so did the intriguing articles that would make them be such a unique aspect of the publication world.
We need to move and keep moving.
This would overall brand Fangoria's entire identity. Today, the articles featured in Fangoria center around what's new in the horror community, such as an announcement of Evil Dead Rise, a new Sam Raimi project, and a preview of what to expect in Disney parks for Halloween. On the other side of things, they also will typically write on social commentary aspects of horror as well, such as discussing horror and how it speaks on the identities of the working class. Overall, it's a rather connective and progressive way of showing that as the horror community grows, so does our acknowledgement of how horror affects us, no matter how minuscule it may seem.
Didn't you?
I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
In the past, when the magazine was just starting, the articles would be more simple, overall involving a deeper dive into upcoming horror films and behind the scenes. This gave way to keeping all of the horror fans up to date and more intel about their favorite films before the use of the internet was around. And after the internet, fans still leaned towards the trusty Fangoria magazine for all the latest news in horror, alongside seeing what fellow fans thought about the films on top of such. I find that this shows an evident growth from Fangoria, which rather fits in with how society has transformed its views on horror, and how we've grown into making more horror films with significant meanings behind them. We started as a society just simply loving how scary horror films were, and we've grown into seeing more value in how we can implement the scare factor alongside the meanings in cinema that we all know and love to analyze. With this said, Fangoria has implemented a reputation of being significant in a variety of ways, paying attention to all of the horror trends that are out there.
What am I going through?
We just need to acclimate.
I don't want to acclimate, I want to go.
With magazine covers that both haunt your dreams and completely capture your attention, Fangoria is completely special. The magazine has moved on to being more digitized, allowing you to tune into all the latest horror and cult news without having to go to the store to buy a copy of the latest issue. This feels like a double-edged sword, however, since those lovely and iconic magazines won't be seen physically around as much anymore. But the good news about this is that bookstores do still carry physical issues, but they're not as easy to find as they admittedly should be. But despite all of this, it is because of everything I've mentioned throughout this article, I can bring justice to why the chilling Fangoria certainly deserves more than it currently gets. Cinema lovers and horror fans would instantly know about this magazine, but I feel as though more should know about this magazine. So with all of this said, I do hope that after reading this article, that it will persuade you to check out Fangoria. There is a rich history behind it all, and it is a hidden gem in the world of cinema and the horror community as a whole.